Evening all, welcome back to Space Engineers. Right, new project time. We're going to build that. That is from the popular multiplayer online game EVE Online. That is the Apocalypse, and we're going to build that. Now, it is the old version of the Apocalypse, but as a bitter veteran, that is the only version of the Apocalypse that I am aware of or care to take note of. And we're going to try and build this thing to scale, which is quite an ordeal, I can tell you. Now, assuming that maybe the bar, each block is maybe 2 meters long. It's pushing it a bit, I know, but it's going to need to be probably double this again, and let's see how we do. But in essence, this was a kind of project that we set about. Nano's Cleric's given me a hand, or Direaver, he's given me a hand, and really we just went for it. We didn't know if it was work, we didn't know if it was going to crash, we just went for it. And a lot of the time we're quite keen to see what the real extents of this game are, because it's sold as a massively kind of sandboxy kind of game. When you look at Minecraft, it obviously has millions of blocks effectively loaded into it, so in theory this game should be able to handle something close. Right, maybe not, but we'll see. So to be honest, when building something this huge, there's always going to be that point when you get to where you think, is this going to work? And I think this particular build was just a joy to do, because it really was pushing exactly what we thought we could do with this engine. So, effectively we've gone from like a frigate, we've then moved on to a cruiser, and now we're building a battleship. And we're going to try and keep it as appropriately sized as the Apocalypse would be in the game. Now, I don't know if it's 1.5 kilometers long from there to there, but it looks that's a long way when you think about it. But we can do some math later and work that out. I can tell you that this took a morning to do, so you're seeing basically condensed, obviously, footage. It's sped up, etc. And hopefully that just goes to show you that if you have a spare morning on your hands, games like Space Engineers are just a joy to play, because they do really give you they give you a hell of a pastime, basically. So I can't instill that virtue enough. Anyway, so when building the Apocalypse, what we basically have to effectively to do is to build almost a long cylinder. And I did choose it because I thought it might be an easier one to do, but I think in a bit of hindsight, what a stupid thing that was, because it's actually not easier in the slightest. It's actually quite difficult to do. And what I'm doing here is I'm actually looking on my other screen trying to work out the particular distances, etc. So yeah, hence the pause. But the reality of it is that you have to kind of build the frame to begin with to really understand how big this thing's going to be. It's only then you kind of get that feeling of how many blocks is this working out to be. Now, the Amar Apocalypse, which is what we're building, is probably it was the biggest ship in the game for many years, because way back when Eve started, it didn't start with battleships. It didn't even start with cruisers. It pretty much kicked off with just frigates. This was way back. And when battleships came in, I think everybody was kind of blown away by certainly the size of them. It was almost as if they were the titans of the age. Because they were huge, and particularly the Apocalypse. Now, the Apocalypse it was a tier 2 battleship, so it took twice as much effort to get. Long story short, it just it was almost like 1.75 times the resources and so on. So it was always seen as kind of, if you could afford an Apocalypse, then you had made it, bro. And that's kind of why I always wanted one. And my first battleship in the game was an Armageddon, which is the tier 1 Amar. But very quickly I was able to sell that and get the Apocalypse. And from that point I was besotted with the shape, the design, the power, the armor tanking capability. I thought this battleship was amazing. And then sadly the dawn of the battleships ended, and battleships all of a sudden became a bit crap as interceptors and things like that came in, and pretty much they took over the capability of sort of warfare. So very sadly, I think that was where I remember seeing all of a sudden, instead of having like an Apocalypse swarm in deep space, you started to see, well, everything really. You saw a lot of different tiers of vessels, which wasn't bad. Back then, though, pretty much it was like, I guess it's like Dust is now. Everything was kind of prototype. back then. So you went for the biggest, baddest, best you could do. So everybody used to fly like a Raven, which is the tier 2 Caldari battleship, and you could fit 2 speed boosters to that and just literally overtake anything in the game. It was ridiculous, but nice in a way. I thought it was always quite nicely done. So I think throughout my tenure in Eve, I've always quite enjoyed the fact that the reality is that battleships and big ships have always been more fun than little ships. That's just my preference. Some people are the other way around. They prefer the whole quote wing commander style game where they would rather fly fighters and do all that stuff. That's not my thing. I prefer great big capital ships that basically are there just to slug and blow the crap out of anything that gets in their way. So hence that's the long, very rambling way of why we're building an apocalypse. I think also one of the things again I would say is that the battleships of Eve and the ships of Eve generally have always been quite interesting to me because none of them are symmetrical, with the exception of a few. So they're always quite interesting to to kind of fly and build. And I think certainly I'm going to give it a go because I've always been quite keen to certainly build stuff. We did do the Rifter. That was fun. Unfortunately, I didn't know much about the game back then, so I did it all kind of wrong. But the Rifter, I think, was a great tech demo, if you like, of learning how to do the various things. But I think now that we've got kind of symmetry down, now that we've got mass bulk building certainly down as well, I think this is a lot easier than it looks. And I think the size is not really the biggest issue, to be honest. It's more a case of the curves. The biggest problem in this game is curves. And the Apocalypse is full of them. So, and it's not only 2-dimensional curves, it's 3-dimensional curves. So, you've got an armored, arched prow backbone. Then you've got like a beak at the front. This is a very difficult ship to build, as you will see throughout this kind of video piece. But to be honest, it's all good. It's all good fun. And I actually managed to remember to build this as a ship as well. So this thing will move and fly and fight and whatever, but I think the reality is it's going to have thousands, if not tens of thousands of blocks. So that's going to be quite a challenge to kind of move around. Eventually, I think I will run out of memory and it will just stop working. So again, a lot of this, I did actually save this map as a test map because I wasn't too sure, firstly, how many blocks you can have active before it starts crashing. And also secondly, how many blocks you can maybe build a ship to while still being able to build the insides of it as well, because remember, it's not just the externals, it's the internals as well. And you'll see that in this particular ship here, where the majority of this build is the externals. But when we come to the internals, by that point, we've got many thousands of blocks in, and already the game was slowing down a bit. But, I mean, for Nano it was, but not for me. I was actually able to run it relatively comfortably. So there we go, checking my plans again, looking at my drawings. It's benefits of having 2 monitors. You can actually look and see what you're trying to build. But again, hopefully you can see, the majority of the build, the basics of the build, is actually quite easy. It's just really, if you've got something of a symmetry there, you can do this kind of mass building, as you see I'm doing here. But again, I would say this was incredibly therapeutic. You sit down to games to do different things, and this one was just an absolute joy. I really relaxed doing this. It was just, it was very sublime almost. And I think, I've always quite enjoyed the building aspect of things. I guess most people want to blow stuff up. Not me. I'd rather build something, I guess. I'd rather, put some effort into building something that I can come back and say, yep, I built that. I think one of the issues I did have is obviously with the flagship that you saw before, the SquadB flagship, which is very much a cruiser. I mean, borderline cruiser. Maybe even a destroyer. In fact, probably a destroyer is maybe better for it. As you can see, we're already having issues with things like TeamSpeak dying as well. But really, I think the beauty of these things is that it's always good to push yourself a bit. I think not just for gaming. I think in life there should be some form of experimentation, and I think I'm always a big advocate of that, because particularly in things like Dust and and just other games that I play, after a while, I think you get a bit bored and you want to try something different. I'm always about pushing the barriers of what a game can do. And look at that, isn't that amazing? Already, I can see it. Can you see it? There's that the prow of the armored bit coming through. You know, I can see it. I can honestly see this thing coming together. And at that point now, I was thinking, yeah, this might just work. And I think I was getting quite excited indeed. But there we go, part 1 done. Join us in part 2 where we continue this build. Hope you enjoyed that. See you next time.